it or not?
A good question. Maybe Mikey. I don't know. I don't know if I leave. I don't think. Let me try it real quick. Let me just leave and then I'll join it. I'll join back. I don't think it stops if I leave.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I don't know if that's an exhaustive test, but it's still recording, so.
Good enough for me. All right. Bum, bum. Who can click the fastest? Dun, dun, dun. All right. As soon as the number of notifications of people joining starts to decrease, we can start. Quick question. Quick question before we start. Who's going to the PowerShell and DevOps Global Summit? Anyone?
Talking about the one in Bellevue?
Yes.
Are you asking Microsoft?
Everyone. I can see Corey had his hands up, so Corey's going.
I mean, I'll be in and out. I'm in the area.
Yeah, you have no excuse if you don't show up. Well, you may have some excuse, but right, just a couple. All right, I think we can get started. So, what's the news? We've seen a few things actually. Since the last time that we had the DSC Community Call, which I wasn't there, and thank you, Ryan. He's not around, but thank you for stepping up. And today, I believe we've got two news. I mean, two releases at least.
Yes, there's two releases. So we did do a GA, so general availability of DSC 3.0 last week. That means that we do support it in production. And then yesterday, I want to say, we did a 3.1 preview 1 release. So we're trying to move very quickly, adding more capability, fixing issues that get reported and stuff like that. One thing to keep in mind, and Mikey, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the current support lifecycle is that 3.0 will be supported up to, I forget how many, some number of months after 3.1 GAs, which I don't, is it like 3 months, 6 months? Okay, so 6 months. So right now we are still kind of a little bit in the early stages of DSC V3, so things are moving quickly. But if you install the one off the Microsoft Store, you'll get auto updated anyways, right? So that's the easiest way. I guess the other thing I'll mention, and this is not, and I'll put a link in the chat here, so I don't think I'm disclosing anything that is not pseudo-public. So this, what's in the chat is a link to a discussion that Demetrius, if you know him, he's the Winget PM. So we are partnered tightly with them on some of the 3.1 work. That's what I'm currently prioritizing. So you can kind of see he's already starting to reach out to some teams, that Microsoft teams specifically, to kind of get them to craft DSC V3 resources. We want to eventually, like the vision we want to eventually get to is that you have your development system set up, or maybe an environment set up within your system for, like, I don't know, developing C# or Rust or Java, whatever the case may be. And then you have all these resources around SDKs, VS Code, extensions, XYZ, and also the Windows environment, like you prefer dark theme, like, and basically you can export the whole thing. And then, for example, you could, if you get a new laptop, you could re-import it there, or you can share it with other people. Or if you create a VM in DevBox, for example, then you can apply it there, right? So the idea for the developer side, and not necessarily system configuration, is this idea, right? So we're kind of still a long ways there. I think the platform is doing a lot of stuff that is needed. There's some other work, and you'll see issues that come up in the repo that I opened based on discussions I had with that team. But a lot of it is needed on the resource side. So that's how Demetrius is starting to reach out to these teams to kind of have them to build, because it doesn't make sense for my team or Winget team to own these resources. It has to be the actual product teams. Same as like PowerShell commandlets, right? Like they need to own their own stuff because as their product evolves and adds more capabilities, they're in the best position to enhance either the resource or their modules.
Or just support in general. But
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So would you say that Winget is definitely the first customer of DSC V3?
I would say that they are our most vocal customer right now. I'll put it that way.
But that's because of Demetrius, right? Which is a
Yeah, I
good
mean,
thing.
like I don't think he's on here, right? But yeah, he's definitely active, and he really sees the vision, and he's trying to get stuff going. So we obviously have other partners I'm not gonna talk about right now. But yeah, they're the most visible right now outside of Microsoft. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Is there, without getting into the specifics, is there projects going on and people have reached out to you, or maybe you've been told that DSC V3 will be needed for those other projects? Is there like stuff happening that we probably don't have any visibility and probably you won't be able to tell anything about it, but is there something happening and then some demands?
So I don't think this is going to be a surprise, although this is still a little bit further out. I mean, obviously, like the whole idea of where DSC V3 really originated from is some feedback from Azure Guest Config, which people may also know as Azure Machine Config these days. And really around customers saying, hey, we love the whole idea of declarative. However, they're not a Windows shop or may not be a PowerShell shop or Windows shop, right? So the question is like, how do we enable them to participate? Because they have their own line of business apps, right? So it's not necessarily that they're relying on third parties to build these resources. Like, how do we help them participate? And that's why one of the fundamental design differences on DSC V3 versus V1 and V2 is that you can build your resource in any language, right? Like we kind of have a very simplified contract. And as long as you adhere to that, you can write it in Go, Rust. You can write it in PowerShell, of course. And we're looking at other things as well to make it easier. But those are more for future discussions.
Okay. Anything else that you have that you want to reach? And what's the roadmap? What's the very high level roadmap?
High-level roadmap is, I think as we move forward, I think I want to set an expectation that the minor releases will happen much faster than the major release. Like 3.0 took roughly a year and a half from the first line of code to GA. I'm expecting 3.1 sometime, let's say middle of this year-ish. And then 3.2 might be end of this year-ish or early next year. I mean, right now, I don't want to be date-driven, right? We want to be quality-driven and also have features that enable a full scenario. But the main takeaway here, though, is that things are moving fast now that we have a base platform that we can build on top of. And, even after the 3.0 GA, we're starting to get feedback on, there's some oops on our part where some stuff probably should have worked better. So there's focus on both bugs fixes as well as features to move forward the platform.
Okay. Who's the PM responsible for DSC V3?
I think the primary PM I will put down as Jason Helmick. Obviously, Michael Green is also playing a big role here. So between those two, but I think if you want to blame someone, I put the blame on Jason. He can take it.
No, you take the blame, but we can discuss with them. That's fine. Sounds good. Yeah, well, I mean, they've been with the DSC community forever, so that makes sense.
Yes.
All right.
We do have a hand up if you want.
Yes, I was about to say, yeah, go ahead. If you have questions, just unmute yourself and ask the question. I will.
Yeah, I think Demetrius just released yesterday a experimental support for DSC V3 in their CLI, which is pretty interesting. They now have a new command added to the Winget CLI that talks directly to DSC V3.
Was that? Do you have a link? Is that public? I've seen it
Yeah,
internally. I didn't know that it was
it's
available publicly already.
Yeah. I'll post it in the chat. I saw it coming from yesterday, so I'm not spoiling anything there secretly. So there's a new future flag. In there that adds a new command. I think it downloads the executable from V3, right?
Yeah, there is still some ongoing discussion with the Winget side on how we want to eventually package stuff, the dependencies, but
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, okay, this is good.
I was excited for it. I saw it yesterday. So
And just so everyone understands what's happening here, like Winget configure previously it worked off of a let's call it preliminary schema that our team and their team agreed on at the time, which was like a long time back, right? And then when we shifted to the current ARM-derived syntax, which is what V3 is based off of, they were still continuing their development because they, have stuff they need to do while we develop our platform. So what this experimental feature enables is actually the existing, I forget what version they call it, like 0.8 or something version of the schema still works. But if you're using configuration built on the V3 syntax, that's what they can consume now as well. So basically, they hand it off to DSC V3 to do the work. But they've also added some additional value on top of it, and that's some of the integration work that our two teams have worked on together. So,
will there something be eventually also available, Steve, from the hackathon that you did with I think it's Omel, one of the new guys at Dimitri's team?
I don't know if those are available outside of Microsoft. You're gonna have to ask Demetrius. I don't want to speak for him, and I don't want to say anything that he isn't ready to say.
Okay.
We'll try to get Dimitrius for the next DSC Community Call, maybe. And
Okay.
we've said Jason 3 times, and I just noticed he joined the call. Hi, Jason.
Oh yes.
Nice to meet you. That's fine. Whenever you want, just pop over. Okay, Ryan, you've got your hands up.
I was just going to ask, because it was asked in the DSC community, what's the plans on adding an LCM type experience going forward? Because I know it was a 3.1 and beyond question.
Yeah. So the current thinking around LCM, so for those who are not as familiar, like the local configuration manager is an agent that runs in Windows as part of V1. And one of the there's for me like two kind of value propositions. One is it runs as local system, I believe, or at least under a service account, right? So admins can send it configurations and they can do stuff that a normal person can't do. But also if you had configuration applied, then because it's an agent that runs all the time, it can actually do drift detection and potentially either alert you or fix, right? Stuff like that. That whole concept today is not part of our immediate roadmap for DSC V3.x. I believe I have an issue open to kind of discuss the concepts of what we want if we were to look at having an agent. Like if we want to turn DSC XE itself into an agent, or a Windows service on Windows or a daemon on Linux, like what are the value propositions? Why do we want it that way, right? But I think for now, again, this shouldn't be a surprise. I think a lot of the value proposition for LCM is right now more in the domain of Azure guest config / machine config. So that's kind of where we have limited resources, so we can't do everything I want to do anyways, unless somehow I get approval for more resources. So I think that makes the most logical sense right now. Now, obviously, that's not going to solve everyone's problems, but one of the design elements of DSC V3 as well is integration with higher level tools. So if you want to use Puppet, Chef, Ansible, whatever, we have deliberate design decisions where even though you're spawning DSC as a process, everything that we emit, like progress information, tracing information, the output can be JSON, so it's structured, right? So you're not having to parse just bare text. So it makes it easier to integrate, in my opinion, than even like the old invoke DSC resource kind of model.
And not just that, but the contract that DSC uses for the resources, if higher order tools don't want to call DSC XE to use a resource, the manifest for command resources defines everything that they need to know in order to do that invocation. So for example, if I had been tasked to write the Puppet integration for DSC instead of PowerShell DSC, it would have taken me about a year less time because I could have just worked with the JSON manifest instead of metaprogramming PowerShell to write Ruby to write PowerShell to call Ruby, which is a thing you should never agree to do. So this should be a much better story for everybody in the ecosystem. And the integration with the higher order tools will be not only a lot easier for people on those sides of the ecosystem, but also more reliable and easier for people to figure out.
Yeah, let me just expand on that real quick before we get to Chris. One of the things we want to do with the DSC V3 platform is really define a way for application services to expose their settings independent of whether or not they're going to be used with DSC, right? So a lot of stuff that we have in terms of like the JSON manifest and stuff is really, in my opinion, not tied completely to, like DSC will use it, right? Obviously, but it doesn't have to be DSC that calls it. So if someone else like Ansible, Chef, or whoever, or even yourself doing your homegrown tooling, you have all the information you need to know how to call this thing and do its settings, right?
And I would just add just to the question of we want an LCM. When can we have an LCM? Like people don't want an LCM. People want a solution, and they want the full-blown solution. And then the full-blown solution, they know that they need the LCM, so they say, I want the LCM. But actually what they want is the solution. The LCM alone still needs to be able to be configured and then to be registered and then securely communicate to a pull server. They want the solution. Let's just, not hide it. So that's why I don't understand why you don't want to go into that path or just under-deliver something, because you can have an LCM, which is just a service or a daemon, as you said. But then you're just going to do, run DSC once and then do it again 15 minutes later. But that's not what people want. And that's already doable. You can have a scheduled task and then you say, well, that's the LCM. And the scheduled task is just doing it every 15 minutes. But people say, yeah, but no, I want to be able to configure it. And again, that's the solution. Chris, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Are you just working? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So yeah, I'm one of the people that was talking about the LCM stuff. So I'll sort of put my hand up and confess to that. So I kind of get where the DSC stuff's going from, that you're trying to get the cross-platform support working, and yeah, it makes complete sense to me. I always looked at the old way of doing Linuxy stuff, and it looked a bit weird. So it's good to try and sort of move into a new direction there, I guess. So from my point of view, I'm using a DSC for quite a different reason, which is that we've got a lot of Windows stuff that we need to control, the kind of, what people would have gone to DSC for in the first place. A lot of Windows servers to control, actually on-premises stuff, because we work in parts of the world where you can't get the internet access and things like that. And I'm really struggling. I'm going to be a little bit blunt here, but I'm really struggling to see what DSC V3 is bringing to people that actually want to use it for what it was originally it seems to be intended for. So like Windows-based configuration as code, sort of a complete solution. So it has got a pull server. It does have all of those sides of things. And I'm slightly worried about with the DSC V3 modules, I'm sitting there going, if everything starts moving to DSC V3 compatible, but it doesn't have the same features that we've got. So we've currently got configurations in PowerShell. We've got a pull server that we're using. We need offline support. We need credentials, which is I know that's a big thing, but I know that's on your roadmap, the ability to do credentials in there. I'm sitting there going, if I rewrite everything in PowerShell, in sort of YAML and everything, I'm struggling to really find what I get out of it at the other end. I just go, well, all I'm going to be able to do is do less than I can do at the moment. So what does the transition process look like for people that are using PowerShell configurations at the moment, for example? And just another vote saying that things like an LCM, they do matter for some situations, particularly like air-gapped or bad internet places. We can't all use Azure Guest configuration, even though perhaps we would love to. So what's that's just adding my voice to that call, really.
So let me give you the short version, okay, of the answer, which is if you're using V1 or V2 today and it's working for you, there's no reason you need to move off of it, all right? I think the value proposition for V3 is more in the future, where we do have more resources available beyond what you have today. Remember, like V1 and V2 I'm going to exclude like some. Okay, I don't know if everyone knows the details there, but like V1 supports WMI-based resources, which are really only the ones inbox produced by Microsoft. And there's also script-based ones, and there's a bunch of class-based ones, right? So if you want to use any of those will work with V3, but you do have to rewrite or translate your PowerShell-based configuration into a YAML or JSON today. And in the future, we're maybe in one of these calls, I'll have Andy do a demo we do have some initial prototyping code working with Bicep, right? So if people who want to have Bicep, we do have that integration happening, okay? But I think the idea is like, if you're starting from scratch, then it may make sense to look at V3. If you have existing configuration already working for you for V1 and V2, it probably makes sense to stay on there for now. I do think that the transition story is something that we do talk about it, and I don't think we have a great story about that yet. But that is something that is on my mind, but it's not an easy problem. And maybe Jason wants to add to it.
Go,
Actually,
Jason.
I don't think that's what I was.
Oh,
Well, I was
were you
just
going to ask a question?
If I can come back on a couple of those points, I mean,
Yeah,
so
go
with
ahead.
the configuration problem, I think it's yeah, I think if there was some way of being able to reuse the configurations we're using at the moment to talk to V3, that would be fantastic. Just because, you know, I mean, I came into this, I looked at the Microsoft Docs a few years ago and I did what I was told. I used configuration data. I did all of this stuff. I came on a community call a little while ago and I was sort of, oh, you should have used a DSC workshop. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's not in any of the documentation. You know, I looked at it now and gone, yeah, maybe I would have done if I'd understood that. So we've got but I'm now deep, you know, I'm well into the woods on this. I've got composite configurations. I've got all this stuff. It works perfectly for what I need to do. It's just a bit hard for me to think about sometimes. But we've got all of that stuff set up, which I am very reluctant to sit there and go, you know, to really have to rewrite quite a lot of config from that side of things. So it's really that forwards compatibility. I guess the point on the modules is, yeah, we can carry on using 1.1 and 2.0 you know, with the existing modules, which is great. But what about when new V3 modules start coming out? I'm presuming that by definition, if another Microsoft product or something starts using a V3 module, or even worse from my point of view, if one of the existing modules decides they're going V3 only, suddenly I'm stuck in a place where I've either got to rewrite all my config, or I've got to go to V3, or I just can't use that module because there's no backwards compatibility layer. So it just feels like we're stepping forward without a kind of clear, or maybe not now, but in the future, we could be stepping forward without a kind of clear backwards compatibility path, you know, which, if I'm honest, is what Microsoft traditionally have been really good at, making sure that it still works in the old stuff and it's not a pain to upgrade between versions.
So on that one, just because we discussed it a little bit in the DSC channel, is there a benefit of us having a compatibility layer that runs DSC executable in V1?
Yes, so that you can run a V3 module from V1. Yeah, I mean, that would certainly have value for me. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm trying to understand what that means. All right, are you talking about turning DSC into a resource for V1, or do you mean DC would consume MOFs and or PowerShell config files?
I would like both, if I'm honest.
I mean,
in my mind, it's the first one.
All right,
maybe both.
You use a script resource that calls DSC, you know, the executable, and then you can work like this. I would definitely not recommend it, but you can do this. I think the problem is you talking about DSC, Chris. You're talking about DSC the solution, and then the PowerShell team is talking about you know, the framework they're building so that in the future, you know, they can do configuration managed by code and stuff like that. The only thing that is in common is the name DSC, but they're not looking at the same layers, you know, in your OSI layers. It's not an application layer. It's not a solution that they're building. This is what you want, the solution. This is not what they're building. This is not what they're talking about. This is not what they've got money to invest, resource to invest.
Yes.
And that's my blunt approach to the problem.
And I think Gail really hits it on the...
I think I understand. Go ahead.
I think Gail really hits it on the head along with Steve. But Chris, I think what the idea is that we're at the beginning of building the platform. So right now what we have today is, if you want to use DSC V3, your V1 and V2 resources will currently work with it. Which, to your point, oh, well, that's nice. I can start playing with DSC V3, but I don't like how the configs are written. Totally with you. Got that. But what we're really looking at is further down the road, there may be a time when those V1, V2 resources that work fine in V3, they don't get all of the features that V3 has, like export and some of the function capability and stuff like that. So the benefit that you may see in the future to moving to DSC V3 may be that you want to utilize and expose some of those features. So today, you may not clearly see a benefit, but you may see one down the road as this stuff starts to come out. Now, one of the things that we are talking about, and Mikey and I are working on this, we haven't publicly talked much about this, but it's an RDK, a resource development kit that also assists you in doing this. And one of the things that we're doing with the resource development kit is we're trying to make it so that with 1 or 2 lines of code, you could actually transform those resources from V1, V2 into V3 resources and start to adopt some of those properties. Now, that still doesn't answer your question about what do we do with configs, but I think what the point is right now we're building out these pieces in the platforms, and we'll gradually start to address, like, what's the best way for PowerShell to work directly as a DSL with DSC V3. That, as we're building the features out, that can actually change dramatically. That's why Mikey and I did a proof of concept on a DSL, but the community's been working on one. We haven't been working on one because we're not done with the feature layout yet. So I think what it is Chris, your points are very well heard. We're not quite there yet, but we'd love to keep that conversation going because those are definite concerns.
Yeah, I think out of the 2 things, my main concern is the inability to reuse my configuration. That's where my personal investment of time and effort is at the moment, in sort of a PowerShell-based configuration process. And that's the way that Microsoft have been and still do on their web, on your documentation. You still do push people into 1 and 2, and you still say, do it in PowerShell, even if that's not the way that everybody does it. And so it feels a bit like I don't have a problem with moving to V3. In fact, I can see what you're saying, that down the line I will get access to more resources. I just don't want to get stuck in a camp where I'm going to keep doing everything in PowerShell, but actually that means I can never leverage V3 stuff. Or I really want to reuse V3 stuff, but I've got to rewrite all my configs to get to it, and I'm just going or even worse, as I said, a new resource comes out that I need, or suddenly a resource becomes V3 only. Like, that would be my nightmare scenario, is if existing PowerShell script-based and class-based resources somehow got broken and ended up being V3 only, and now suddenly I can't even touch them without doing a huge amount of work. That, to be honest, my ideal situation is I don't have to redo that work. You give me backward support, you respect the 10 years or so that DSC has been in place and that people have got this stuff, and you go, we're gonna support you guys and get you. But maybe, yeah, new stuff, definitely use the new YAML stuff. And I completely understand why YAML is much, much better as a solution. It's just that I don't get paid to rewrite things. I get paid to do new stuff. And my bosses just look at it and go, well, I'm going to spend a year and a half, and at the end of it, we'll have exactly what we had before, but it will be in the new shiny thing. And they'll be like, nah, don't do it then. Let's stick around with a pull server. No, So, I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
let me cover a couple of points here, right? Like, just to be clear, LCM and DSC V1 and V2, like the PSR configuration module in Windows, there's no plan to remove that from Windows, right? So it'll be there for 10 plus years, probably long after I'm dead. Okay, let's say. I'm hoping not to die anytime soon, by the way. The other thing is, like, I think it makes sense for someone, which is not necessarily my team, because I don't think this would be that hard, with one exception, which I'll get to, which is the ability to morph to YAML or JSON translation, right? Because those are both static files. And so doing that is just an exercise for someone to spend time on, right? And just with the understanding that the benefit of that is temporary, right? Like, at some point, people should be writing stuff natively in V3. So it would help a lot of people who have existing configurations today, right? So I get the benefit, but at the same time, it's not part of my roadmap to build that tool. All right, with that said. Also, if you really want to do it from the PowerShell layer, it could make sense to translate from PowerShell configuration into bicep, right? Those are kind of a little bit more equivalent. Again, that's not in my roadmap. because again, I have only limited resources. I have to pick and choose which battles to fight. Now, one thing I won't mention, because I do see Nitin on the call here, like I think Azure Machine Config also has the same problem where Machine Config today is based off of DSC V2. And so they do have MOFs, right? So at some point, and I'm not announcing or proposing anything, right? But just to be clear, but they do also have the same problem, right? Which is they have some existing customers using the existing stuff. How do they move to V3? It'll probably be side by side for a long time, maybe, right? But so I don't have an answer, but I think this is a problem that is apparent, and we just got to figure out who has the resources to kind of address parts of it.
Yeah.
And by the way,
I
the other
think
thing I'll mention real quick,
that was one of the struggles that because at the moment I'm already facing a V1 to 2 migration, because at the moment we can use in some places the old state configuration in Azure, which is now I think 2 years away from end of life. Yeah. Now with that, I'm looking at that at the moment, and I think I can just take my existing MOF files and dump them, and it will still work. Like it doesn't matter that I can't compile it in there. I just have to move my compilation stage elsewhere, and that shouldn't be too painful. I haven't tried it yet, but that's my understanding. Possibly some issues with the credential management and things like that. So I'm looking at that. It's more just it's just the everything has changed basically. That's the part of it, and anything that can be done to kind of smooth that transition over, I think would certainly massively help us. What we're doing.
So the other thing I want to make sure is clear on other thing that you had mentioned about resources, right? So let's say that someone decides, hey, I'm going to continue to write my my DSC V3 resource and PowerShell classes, right? Those will be a superset of what you can do with V2 today, right? Meaning that if someone, either whether it's Microsoft or someone else, is producing these new resources written in PowerShell, those will work with V2, but you can't leverage the newer stuff that we have, like export, for example, right? And stuff like that. So it is compatible in the sense that it is as compatible as it would look like a V2 resource, basically. All right, so just be clear, like there's no breaking, we're not doing breaking changes at that part, but if you want new capabilities, then yeah, you have to move all the way to V3 to leverage any of the newer stuff that we have. Which should not be a surprise.
That makes sense.
Just, that's just how software evolves, right? If we always look backwards, we'll never move forward at all. So
thank you. That's it's just trying to find that sweet spot really between as you said, you've got to move forward. So I don't expect everything to stay in the past, but trying not to make it too painful to move into the future.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Definitely how we move existing customers forward. Top of my mind, not an easy problem to solve.
Thank you.
But we're aware of it, so that's the best I can say right now.
So I don't know if Chris, I don't know if you've seen Nitin's message in the chat, which says, if there's a tool to do from MOF to YAML, would you move everything to YAML?
I'll be honest, the MOF to YAML thing isn't so helpful, because what I'm doing is I'm dynamically generating resources. I've got, and I need to be able to sit there and go, we've got 13 business units across different countries, and I've got a little bit of Active Directory for each one of them, and there's a whole load of stuff that it spins up around the place. So I kind of need to have the dynamic bit of PowerShell working. That's ideally, I would be hoping for something that allows us to retain the PowerShell level of it, the PowerShell side of compilation, which is something at the moment you can only really do nicely in 1.1. Actually, even 2.0 is just define your resources. As far as I can tell, it doesn't let you do looping and things like that. So yeah. So
basically, you're tied. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
We're invested in the original 1.1 feature set, which is default configuration data, the ability to do nodes, node config nodes, composite resources, all of the stuff that you can, all the stuff which I'll say again is still what Microsoft tell you to do when you look at the documentation, which is where I started out. Like even today, they'll still say, hey, use 1.1, here's the instructions.
It's going to be like that for some time. I expect that we're going to be six months or so before we start seeing an uptake in people really using DSC in production and being able to work through all of these sort of, I won't say niggles, but like the points that you're raising. What I think from previously doing dynamic DSC configuration compilation, which is what sounds like you've been doing, is you want to do that in a pipeline one way or another. Now, the best way to do that obviously is if you've got a pipeline that can do it, and then you come back with a MOF file, which is why Nitin's asking about the MOF compilation, because that's what the end resource will look at. That's useful if you can do that change from the MOF to YAML, but whatever endpoint that we use in the future for DSC to do it, that's going to come later on. It's not going to be something that's we're going to get in April, for example.
Yeah. What I'm imagining
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I get this sort of, I get why you could do a MOF to YAML conversion really easily, and that's obviously that's a really easy solution for, especially for people currently using 2.0. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'm imagining that if the DSC V3 resource comes out that I really want to use in my existing config, right? So I really want to use this new module that's come out, and I want to use that within my existing loops and things like that.
So that was why earlier on I suggested us writing a resource that basically wraps DSC V3 and then runs the DSC V3 engine within your 1.1 or 2 engine.
And that's why I think I reacted positively to that, because I can see that as long as the 1.1 processes are still sort of supported in that way, that means that I don't lose anything. I can carry on doing what I'm doing. I don't get the benefits of V3. I get the benefits of V3. They look very nice, but I understand why I would want them, but I don't get them. I accept that as a trade-off. But the benefit that I get is that I can still carry on using these very new resources that are coming out. I don't have to be afraid of a module sitting there saying, "Hey, this is a team." Let's say an internal Microsoft team decide that they're not going to create a V1 or V2 resource anymore. That's fine. I can carry on calling them from my existing stuff, even if it's a bit of a kludge, even if it's not very fast. At least then I can carry on with what I've got.
It also gives you the benefit of being able to set up a small proof of concept of using DSC V3 with something already works, and then once you've got that, you can start going, right, let's do a conversion of V1 to V3, which is 9 times out of 10 when I've done any sort of consulting, that's where you get the buy-in from the higher level. Or that funding to do that project.
Running V3 from 1.1 would be very helpful, and I'm hoping not that hard. I don't know, but who knows? Yeah.
So basically, you're tied up with the DSL, Chris. That's what's happening. So you want to be able to generate what exists. So you've got your loops, and your loops are PowerShell based. So basically, what you really want is for the DSL to keep working. And then if you just keep the same DSC V1 and 2 environment that you have, you want to be able to have just access to the resources. And that's one of the worries that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's completely. Yeah.
Yes. And I agree with Mikey on what he just put, which is probably easier to write a function that scaffolds a class definition from a DSC resource manifest. Yeah, probably. But yeah, I just want to reiterate your problem, Chris, is you're looking at the solution part of it, where you have your configuration data that fed into like some scripts that then generates the compiled version for a node, and that's not what DSC V3 is. They just take the result and then there's no.
But it's still being called DSC, isn't it?
I've said it before.
I have sympathy for the argument that guys should have chosen a new name. But if you choose the old name, you should expect us to sit there and say, "Well, is there a migration path?" Then if I'm being a bit mean there, but you know what I mean. If the implication of using version 3 is that there is going to be a migration path from 1 to 2 instead of it just being a whole new product where you just have to rethink it. And there is a migration. It uses 1.1 and 2.0 resources. That is the link. It's not completely unjustified to keep those two together. But it would be good for those of us that have invested in it. Yeah,
I would say look at things for where it's going to be in 2026. That's where we want to look at the future travel, and the points that you're raising are points that I know a lot of the people in this call and many others outside of this call have been thinking about for not just a matter of months but years. It's something that's been painful over the years, and we'll get there to where we want to go. The direction of travel is always improvement.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
A point I wanted to raise is it worthwhile us adding the discussions to the DSC community organization?
What kind of discussion?
So that we can have general discussions that aren't just stored within the DSC channel or within this call, much like what we do in the PowerShell wider community. Or is it worthwhile just putting them in the PowerShell?
There's nothing against the discussions, but probably there should be where the contributors to the projects are there. So probably on the DSC repository. I don't know. For the resources, it's fine, and I'm not against discussions, obviously, but I just don't see what you want to discuss. But open the discussions, and then we can discuss over there. I guess on GitHub, it doesn't matter where you put it as long as people are looking over there. So just open the discussion and then drop the links wherever we chat, and we'll pick it up. I had a question because I've seen Nitin was there. Is there any plan, or what are the plans for machine configuration and DSC V3, if any idea in the long term, short term?
I think right now we are currently looking into certain use cases for DSC V3 that can be tightly integrated in machine configuration. So that work is underway. Nothing concrete like as of the second per se, but there's a lot of discussions happening on the use cases and scenarios which are really interesting to incorporate in machine configuration, and we'll hopefully be able to share something soon.
Sweet, thank you. Is there any other question? Feel free to just unmute.
Yeah, Mikey, small question. Any ideas on the standardization of documentation for like comment-based DSC resource? I think you already did a tremendous job in the latest pull request, but any ideas on standardizing it further in the community somewhere?
So you're asking about being able to generate reference documentation from PowerShell implementations. So this is something that's been on my radar for a while, even before the DSC work started up. Sean and I have a set of open source tools that we're working on under the Microsoft open source namespace. Microsoft/documentarian is the repo. I'll grab a link in effect. And one of the things that I was looking to address there was, how do you document basically not commandlets in PowerShell, right? Because comment-based help for commandlets is pretty well solved, but if you're documenting a class or an enum or a DSC resource or a script analyzer rule or any of those things, we just don't have a good way to do that for reference documentation. So I have some functional code that needs more massaging before it could be released usefully, I think, that has a sort of extension model for finding comment annotations in PowerShell code and generating from that a YAML document that represents the reference documentation for that item, and then being able to use different transformers to turn that into Markdown or HTML or whatever you want. So all of that is something that Sean and I are working on way off to the side, unrelated to DSC. For DSC V3, there's an issue open around standardizing a docs model for DSC V3 resources. Right now, all of the documentation for those resources is me handwriting things, which I would like to stop doing at some point, because I think having the standard way to move forward will be really useful, and being able to have it in a data format will give us a lot of future benefits, not least of which is just being able to auto-export for Learn for our own documentation site. Once I have all this set together, I can start those conversations with the docs platform team to be able to generate HTML for it instead of me having to constantly do it myself. But for right now, probably the way that we'll end up getting there for the DSC resources will be some combination for DSC resources implemented in PowerShell will be some combination of the work that Sean and I are doing for being able to retrieve comment-based help for classes and enums and that sort of thing, and the docs model that I'm working on for DSC resources. But all of that is a ways off.
Cool.
What's coming up? For the resources, I know that you've got work in the pipeline. Can you tell us a little bit, because people have been saying, we don't know how to do X, or maybe the documentation is still the old documentation. What do you have in mind of what's coming up, and where do you want to take things going forward? And if you have a roadmap about the documentation, what does it look like, at least in your head for now?
Yes. There's going to be a slight restructuring of the docs. There's a couple of waves of docs updates right now for V3. The first wave is currently in technical review. The second wave will be around schema doc updates that are going to get expanded. And then the third wave will be adding more tutorials and that sort of thing. But the plan is for those, and this is woefully out of date, so don't go look at the actual stuff for it now, but let me grab the repo for you. So for a lot of reasons you don't care about, we're putting our samples off to the side in a static, in a GitHub repository and a static site that has to do primarily with internal stuff around how the Learn platform works and what you can show and how you can do things there. But the idea here is that we'll have a bunch of different tutorial scenarios, and then each of those scenarios will have implementations in different languages, different paradigms that you might be using to develop resources. So there will be PowerShell examples for any of the tutorials. Where it makes sense, right? You're probably not going to implement a DSC adapter resource in PowerShell. Maybe you are. I think that that's probably unlikely. But for the general resource stuff and adding export capabilities, those kinds of things. So my plan is to add those types of tutorials here, and that should help to kind of flesh those things out. Reference documentation updates will continue to expand. And conceptual documentation has a big update in this first wave. There'll be a lot more clarity around some of the concepts in DSC.
Yeah, so let me just add, for clarity's sake, and as Mikey is talking about tutorials and things like that, yes, we're going to have examples and things like that on GitHub itself, but also in the docs, Mikey and I are working on language-specific resource creation details. In other words, how to get started writing a resource in a variety of different languages. That will also back up what I had mentioned earlier, our resource development kit, which will hopefully provide you easier scaffolding and things like that around the resources. So I would expect it, as Mikey's pointing out, he's feverishly working on this now, but as we're putting some of this documentation together, especially over the next couple of months, I'd expect that you'd start seeing some of this come out and to be able to get some guidance from it.
When are you doing videos again, Jason, about how to do stuff? I want to see you.
I don't know, Gail.
You
want to get together and do them with me? Well, we can both do them and we'll figure it all out. And it's a great question. As we start making tutorials, for the documentation tutorials and that, I'm going to start. I've already shot some, but I'm going to start doing some small videos. How to get started with this, get started with that, get started with that. Those are the things that are in my kind of bailiwick. But Gail, and to anybody else. As we, just like kind of, as we start to get more comfort and intellectual property around DSC V3, I think it'd be great to be able to do more both videos and conferences to show use cases, both in Azure and not in Azure. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Sounds good. We'll discuss in 3 weeks. Ish. All right. Is there any other question? What would Microsoft like to see from the community? Because there's no solution at the moment, and probably other solutions, existing solutions like we said, Ansible, Puppet, Chef, these kind of solutions. Maybe eventually they will be looking at DSC and integrate DSC V3. In the meantime, what do you think the community should be doing, and how can they help you, whatever you need us to do? Jason, Steve, Mikey.
Yeah, I almost feel kind of bad in saying this, but it's what we normally ask you for, right? If you're interested in DSC V3, this is a great time to go out, try the bits, play with the bits, tell us what you do like, what you don't like, especially what problems you're running into. And we are interested in your ideas. I know we've been talking about some today, and we're like, yeah, some of that is going to take a little bit, but some of it we have to work with right now with some of the partners that we're engaged with. So honestly, your feedback right now is really important. So if you can play with it, and just like what Chris was doing, hey, it would matter a lot if you did X, Y, Z. I know it's not on your plans. That's still a great conversation so that we're aware of that. But specifically, if you can find a technical problem with the product, that goes a long way right now.
So I'm gonna, I agree with what Jason's saying, so I'm gonna say something different, all right? I think two things that come to mind, and one based on this discussion, is working on tools to help the transition, right? Like MOF to either JSON or YAML, but also for the existing community PowerShell class-based resources, for the ones that make sense, because maybe it doesn't make sense for all of them, like adding export capability, I think would also be a value add to get people to start looking at V3, right? Like that's a new thing that you can do. So
we're waiting for the how-to docs from Mikey, right?
Well, I mean, yes.
and he's working on them. I know he's working on it.
So I know he is. We discussed a bit today, so I know he is. And I say I'm not, I say it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And I'm putting him on the spot. Sorry. That sounds good. Is there anything that you have in your release pipeline that pretty much when you're going to release, maybe when you're going to start working on it? I don't know. I'm thinking about Credential. If there's anything that you have plans, or
Yeah, let me talk about Credential. So the current way to do it with V3 is through a parameter. All right. So if you're familiar with ARM templates, it's just a parameter. So it's an input you provide for the quote-unquote configuration file, and you would have it as a type, either secure string or secure object. Don't confuse secure string in a DSC parameter as a C# secure string. There's no encryption, okay? The contract here is that if the parameter type is a secure string or secure object, then we don't emit the contents through any of our tracing, all right? So it won't accidentally get dumped to a log or to your console, stuff like that. But it is not encrypted in memory. There is other issues I've already opened recently because there are other partners who have similar needs. It's like, all right, what is a good way where if we're deploying this across hundreds or maybe thousands of machines, and it does need to authenticate with something else, we do need to provide something that maybe a parameter isn't the best way to do it for whatever reason, right? So one of the issues that opened up, I forget what maybe I'll find it later and put it in the chat, is basically, all right, how do we do the equivalent of secret management module that we have for PowerShell in DSC, right? Because one of the things I don't want to do is to say, hey, secrets in DSC is hard-coded to this technology, right? We want to be a platform and keep it open. So if you're using Keychain, Azure Key Vault, XYZ, like by all means use whatever you want, but someone else may have to build that extension so that we can, so we just have like a contract that says, again, if you're familiar with secret management, there's get secret, set secret, and I think it's get secret list or whatever we call it. I forget all those details, but basically you can enumerate the secrets and stuff, right? So we want to provide some of those capabilities, most likely as a function that you use as part of an expression in a DC configuration. But then the underlying vault that actually stores it is up to you. It could be Credman, Keychain, Azure Key Vault, whatever. Like we don't care. But now we have a way to say you can now share your configuration with someone else and not have secrets inside the configurator. That's the main thing we want to avoid, is having any secrets inside the config.
So do something similar to secret management, which you could do if it was only PowerShell, but now you need to do it for, I would say, more low level, so then it can be accessed from any other language or resources, basically implementation.
Yeah, and by the way, so one of the things that will show up in 3.1 to some capacity, but not probably complete, is this new idea of an extension model for DSC V3, right? So the way you quote unquote extend DSC V3 today is by having resources. So when I say extension here, I'm not talking about resources. I'm talking about extending capabilities of DSC V3, right? Without going into a bunch of details, like there's other ways that we could extend DSC V3 capability without having it all built into DSC itself, right? It's similar to like modules or PowerShell, right? Like, so conceptually. So again, the way I'm thinking about it is, hey, one of the things that I'll probably leverage is, and it's something I have started some work on, which is its extension model. So basically, the way I think about extension is you're a separate command line tool, and we'll have a separate JSON manifest as a contract to say, here, you tell us what capabilities to support. So when those capabilities come up, we'll call you to do some work, right? And one of the capabilities might be secret management, let's call it, right? So in which case, we'll say, all right, here in this configuration, they're calling get secret foo, and then we'll figure out, all right, and maybe it's actually the name of the vault and the name of the secret. And then we'll say, all right, the name of the vault here is Azure Key Vault, or maybe in a different case, it's Credman, what I don't really care. But the secret is foo, you give me that back, and then I'll use it elsewhere in the configuration, right? So
instead of rewriting secret management, you could just say, well, we have this extension, which is secret management in PowerShell. So you have this definition of the dependency.
Secret management itself could be the extension, right? And the only command line is it just has to have PWSH or PowerShell XE in front of it, right? So
yes, okay,
exactly, same idea. Great.
So already working on it.
Yeah, there's already plans in place, and my goal is to get that part, at least that part, into 3.1 in time, but we'll see.
Sounds good. Amazing. I think we've reached the time. Maybe one last question, if anyone wants to unmute and ask questions to everyone around. No.
I might just ask a quick one, which is curious. Sorry if this has been asked before. How closely do you guys work with the Microsoft 365 DSC team? As in, the one that manages Microsoft 365, which is still sort of a class non-script-based resource, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It's not the Microsoft team. It's actually community from people in Microsoft. So Nick Charlebois, I believe. Raymond can talk more about the team behind it. Raymond?
Yeah, I'm also trying. Sorry, I was getting late. Yeah, I'm also trying to find out who is not only responsible but driving the M365 DSC resources.
I believe Nick is the main contact. We've had conversations with him.
Yeah, most of the stuff comes from Git. Most of the pulls end up with Nick at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, but there is something in the background happening, and we need to see where the strategy moves to.
I'll just say the last conversation we had with Nick is they were moving in a slightly different direction, but we want to make sure we at least align our concepts, even if the code is not the same. So
yeah, because there's been a number of conversations I've had with them over the LCM and things like that, because they're still quite heavily dependent on the LCM and for doing just basic stuff, and like they advertise stuff in the resource. We've had some conversations about trying to make it so that they can use some PowerShell core stuff in there, because at the moment it's also all 5.1, which is causing problems with the pmp.powershell first, which is like the main way to do SharePoint. So I've been working with somebody on trying to sort of get a compatibility layer, letting you call PowerShell core from 5.1. But it's just interesting because, they've been saying, oh, maybe DSC V3 will change this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, only if you move to class-based resources and do the other things as well. If you're in a script-based resource, as far as I can tell, the only way.
Just to be clear, you can still be a script-based resource, but we will use Windows PowerShell for those.
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah. So if you wanted to start using another PowerShell core module in a script-based resource, you're going to have to do some sort of. We found some way of doing it.
You would wrap your script-based resource with a class. Right? That's the way to do it.
Okay, fine, yeah. But anyway, the point is, it was just interesting because it looks like a sort of Microsoft project, but I wasn't sure how aligned it was, how closely you guys are working together. But you're having conversations. That's good.
Yeah, it's only at the conversation level at this point.
Yeah.
And by the way, Chris, the M365 DSC module is not depending on the LCM. Of course, you can invoke the resources even without the LCM, but for some reason there is a dependency on PowerShell 5.1 that I haven't figured out yet, because all the modules that the M365 DSC modules uses are PowerShell 7 ready, and they work on PowerShell 7 much better. Exactly what you mentioned, the PNP module is very painful to use in PowerShell 5.1 because you're stuck with a 2-year-old version.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was a design decision that the PNP project team decided to go with. Erwin van Heuen is the lead for PNP PowerShell, but that was something that was discussed at many different events over a number of different years with that team.
Yeah, the resources will work in 7, like you're right, but there's other functionality that the Microsoft 365 DSC team advertise, like drift correction and that sort of stuff. It's literally part of their website. Say, hey, and we'll monitor drift, and you can watch the Windows event log. That stuff is all very 5.1 LCM dependent. So not the. I agree with you. Like to do a get set.
Don't mix it up, Chris. It's not the LCM. The LCM is just invoking the resource. The resource.
Typical.
It's not just me, is it?
Good bit.
Yeah, it's just getting there. Oh wait.
He's in a hotel in Cologne, so he probably had a poor Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. My
That's
team
right.
is. Yeah, my team is restarting every 10 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So let me just recap that. So it's not the LCM that takes care of the drift. It can be also a script that is invoking the resources on a regular basis, and the event logging is also done by the resource, not by the LCM. So getting rid of the LCM is kind of a project, but it's not undoable. Maybe...
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I completely understand that you can do that. I more mean right now, I'll post a link in the doco, like there's stuff that they're telling you to do in their documentation, which is definitely LCM dependent. Literally, like they're telling you to run apply configuration and all that sort of stuff. So right at this moment in time, yes, they could get rid of the LCM if they wanted to, but they haven't, and they're still very much dependent on it in the project as it stands today. Even if, I use it. I mean, I don't use any of their stuff. That I just use it as a normal resource, and that can work in 7 or 2.1, 5.1. Yes, very aware of that. So yeah, I'm talking about edges of the project, not like the core of the project is dependent on the LCM.
And that's going to be something that you'll find with quite a few of different resources. There's going to be edges that that still make use of 5.1 feature sense. It's just going to be that's going to be the way it is. You're on mute, Gail.
Well, I know I wasn't mute, but because I had to change and remove the headphones. Yes, I say be careful, because there's always this problem where LCM is because you want this solution that just goes around and do the stuff, and then you've got the resource on the resource level that you can invoke in whatever environment that you want to have. So looks like from the link that you posted, this is, again, you use the LCM because you manage the drift, because you want the solution. It's not about the resource, it's about the solution. So it's Microsoft 365 DSC, but it's not about what they're doing. It's just if you use the old DSC to run the configuration about M365 DSC, then it will do the configuration drift, manage the drift over time. So again, it's a different problem, I would say. It's not M365 DSC specific. It's about the solution that is provided within Windows. All right. We can save more questions for next time in 6 weeks. And I don't know when that takes us. That will be just after Summit, right? Something like that. So I hope there will be many more discussions during Summit. And then we'll be back probably couple of weeks after with the DSC Community Call. And thank you for recording, Steve. And I will just make sure that Daniel can take the recording and publish it to YouTube. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.